Hi everybody, it's Usernamekate here and welcome back to the channel. I've recently put 500 miles on Triumph's 2025 Tiger Sport 800, and I'm not just talking about town commutes or country lane scratches, but I've actually done a fair bit of motorway mileage. So in this video I'll be talking about how this bike really performs as a sports tourer, from comfort to fuel range to tech to luggage capabilities, wind protection, all that good stuff. So if you're wondering if this bike can handle the long distance mile munching, then this is the deep dive for you. In this video today, we're going to specifically cover how well this bike works as a sports tourer. Of course, there are a lot of first impressions reviews on YouTube about this bike, and that's all well and good, but ultimately you'll not know how competent the machine is as a sports tourer unless you actually do go out there and get a few miles under your belt. Now, I've done just over 500 miles on this bike in a variety of conditions, from town riding, country lane riding, but I have been fortunate enough to put a lot of motorway miles on this bike. So I think I'm in a good position to give you guys an idea about how this bike actually handles as a tourer. If you guys are interested in finding out about the stats and the specs of this bike, I have covered this already in a first impressions review, which I will link up here somewhere so you can click it and watch that if you desire. However, in this we're going to talk about aspects that I think are important to people who might be purchasing it. Alright, without further ado, let's start with the first topic: comfort. I think that's a very important topic for a sports tourer, given the fact that it's designed for you to spend many hours in its saddle. So I've actually done, obviously, stopping for fuel and cake breaks and stuff like that, but in essence I've actually done a full working day's riding on this bike from 9 to 5, and what I did find was that the seat is actually extremely comfy. I only found myself getting kind of a numb bum after about my 5th hour, but again, that's with lots of, stops for mooching around and, coffees and cake and stuff like that. But as far as comfort goes, it's one of the comfier sport tourers that I've ridden. For example, I have a Suzuki GSX-S 1000 GT in the garage at the moment, and that's their sports tourer, which leans more towards the sporty side. And that seat is like a plank of wood. So by comparison, riding this has actually been very plushy and very nice. The rider triangle of this bike is just lovely for someone of my height. Obviously I can't comment if you're, a 6 foot person, but for me at 5'4", it's very comfy. There's not an extreme bend in the leg. The bars are very upright, very commanding, and you do feel very, very comfortable just riding and putting loads of miles in the setup. Yeah, so the rider's triangle for me is really, really nice. I'm 5'4", so I'm quite a short human, I guess, if you want to call me that. Creature's more appropriate sometimes. But I do have a nice bend in the leg that's quite neutral. It doesn't feel super sporty or extreme. You've got the bars, which are, they're up in a nice position. You feel large and in charge and commanding, and you can see everything and you feel comfy. So the riding position for me with this was actually really nice. I didn't find myself getting backache, especially with the top box, because I could just throw my rucksack in there, which was actually really good. But we'll get onto luggage in a second. Now, unfortunately, I can't comment on this bike from a pillion perspective, and I really wanted to. I wanted to get a proper well-rounded, touring perspective for you guys. But the morning that I was set to be pillion on this, I thought I better just check Triumph's loan agreement. Clicked on it, not insured for pillion cover. So I was like, good job I checked that at the last minute. So unfortunately, I had the best will in the world, but I wasn't able to give you guys a understanding of what it feels like as a pillion. So I'm sorry about that. I could only do what I could do in that situation. The next topic I'm going to hit head on is wind protection. How good of a job does this screen do at deflecting that wind so you don't feel like you're getting a load of wind hitting you in the face? Well, for me, I've ridden with the screen up, and to be honest, I did find myself a little bit like, you know, when you just feel like your head's getting battered about a little bit. So I put the screen down and just felt like you had the clean air hitting you, and it was actually pretty good. And you know, I was progressing on the motorway to get home, and I never felt like it was uncomfortable. Although I can imagine if you are a bit taller than myself, you know, in its lowest position, it might feel like it's doing bugger all. I don't really know. I can't comment from a tall person perspective because I'm not that fortunate. I'm quite short. I do feel like these do a fairly decent job, the little plastic deflectors, you know, just to take the pressure off your chest a little bit for sure. But yeah, I'm much preferred riding with the screen down. I do wonder if maybe you could get some accessories where it clips onto the screen and just gives you a bit more deflection if you are taller. But from my point of view, wind comfort is definitely better when the screen is all the way down. Moving on to a topic that I think is quite important, and that is vibrations. Now, on a touring bike where you're designed to do lots of miles, vibrations are not your friend. You can end up with tingly fingers and stuff like that. What I will say with this bike, if you are on the motorway and you're in fifth gear and you're doing normal motorway speeds, you know, it's manageable, it's tolerable. It's when you drop gears and you launch it higher into the rev range where things start to get a bit buzzy. And if you're like me and you like a bit of a sportier ride, so, you know, on the day that I rode this and did lots of motorway miles, I also did lots of really tight, twisty lanes. So I like to be kind of highly sprung when I'm doing them lanes, which, you know, Mike, my partner, he prefers to be high up and he suffered less with vibrations. But because I like to be primed and ready to go and, you know, just ready with a fistful of power whenever I want it, it can be a bit buzzy when it is, you know, higher up in the revs. What I will say is after the full working day of riding this bike, when I got home, I can tell if a bike's buzzy or not because when I look down like this after a long day's riding, sorry, you probably just got my door in then, my bad. When I do that, I get like a buzz, like a vibration up my spine. It's quite worrying actually. It all started after a BMW trip on the M1000R. I got home and I was looking down and I was feeling the vibration up my spine, and I suppose maybe that's like people that do pneumatic drills for a living. You know, the body just gets absolutely battered with vibrations, and I feel like because I do this as a job, my body also gets battered with vibrations, and yeah, it reared its ugly head on the M1000R launch. But at least now it is a good indication for me as if a bike's been a little bit buzzy, because I can really feel it vibrating through my spine when I look down, which isn't ideal. But yeah, it does tell me that I did suffer from that when I got off this bike. But again, you know, probably definitely a consistent 6 hours in the saddle out of the 9, you know, accounting for stops and, you know, multiple stops, multiple cake stops, tracking, stuff like that. So yeah, I do think it is a bit of a buzzy bike, especially if you are going on the motorway and, you know, using your right hand a bit more than the speed limits would suggest is legal. Rumour has it. So yeah, you can feel it when you're pushing on with the buzziness, or when you drop it down a gear because you want it to be primed and ready to rip. And yeah, you want to hear that induction rot. That's another thing, the induction rot. It sounds so good that it encourages you to just drop a gear and wind it on so you can hear it raw. And obviously when you drop a gear and wind it on, you're asking a lot from the revs, which is making it a bit buzzy. So for normal journeys, because I've had trips on this bike where I've just nipped out for, you know, an hour, 2 hours, just riding around a mixture of roads, I've come back and I haven't actually felt the vibration. But doing prolonged motorway stints and yeah, just trying to get home, yeah, I did feel the vibrations. Before I move on to the next topic, it is probably equal parts peg and bar for the buzz. Next topic, cruise control. Very basic, but very handy. And it is very good if you just want an easy life. Press the button, set it, and you can just cruise and give your right hand a little bit of a break by just being able to rest on it, as opposed to, you know, having it wound open. And yeah, it's definitely a good thing. I think all sports tourers should have cruise control because they're designed to do lots of big miles, and anything that can help that, happy days, great. What I will say is, at first I found it, you know, very kind of aggressive when coming off the cruise control. It would be nice if you could press the cruise control button to just, you know, deactivate it, but you can't. You have to either back brake, front brake, you know, roll on, clutch, and sometimes I can get it smooth, usually a bit of back brake, or, you know, just ever so slightly a bit of throttle, or even just touching the front brake, not like pulling it in or anything, but just, you can just touch it enough to activate it and it doesn't make you dive or anything like that. It is more aggressive on the, you know, coming off the cruise control if you've got quite a strong headwind on the motorway, as I found out. But yeah, the fact that it's got it is a good thing in my opinion, I think. Next topic, tank size and fuel efficiency. So this bike has an 18.6 litre tank, which, you know, is acceptable, I would say. I think anything from 18 to 20 litres, you know, is a good size fuel tank for, you know, chomping the miles. I was setting trips when I was filling up and, you know, clocking the mileage when I had to next fill up, and through a mixture of riding, town, sprightly country road riding, and a heck of a lot of motorway, probably more so motorway than anything else, but the road blasts were just that, fun blasts. It was showing 15 miles on the range and showed that I'd done 188 miles. So we rode to the petrol station, which was about 3 miles away, and we just filled up. So by those calculations, you know, it should get 200 miles to the tank. I can imagine if you ride this very sedately and, you know, always stick to the speed limits, it wouldn't surprise me if you could probably get like 230 out of this tank, like at a push maybe. But yeah, I was getting around the 200 mark with a mixture of all kinds of riding. Next topic, heat management. Does the bike get hot on long runs? Unfortunately not. I kind of wish it did, because I was begging for warmth on the ride back to Manchester from Hinckley, and it was really, really cold, and I just wanted some heat from the engine, but it didn't give me any. It's not quite like a Ducati or anything like that. Next, luggage. That's what we're going to talk about. So this bike starts at £10,995 if you pick the base colour, an extra £100 if you pick a fancy colour like this, or the beautiful yellow, or even the blue, the bright blue, that's the extra £100. Then if you want to spec it up with luggage, you know, on the surface, the top box is, I think, £620 roughly, and it isn't, because you need this rack, then you need the plastic mounting rack on top of the metal rack, then you need all your locks, and you have optional extras of pads for pillion comfort. Then you have these, which you can get colour coded. So the price actually does mount up. I'm gonna insert like a scroll through Triumph's site now, so you can actually see the cost of all the luggage. I'll pop that on now, but do bear in mind that these prices that you see are excluding labour, I do believe, so be mindful of that. So the luggage actually does work out at quite expensive, in my opinion, but doesn't all luggage? I mean, flipping heck, BMW GS luggage is wildly expensive. But yeah, so what do you get? Well, you get the panniers, which have a combined luggage capacity of 57 litres, and then you've got a top box which supposedly holds 49 litres. Now, they do say that this top box can fit 2 full face extra large helmets in it. So one of the helmets that I tried was one of mine, which is an extra small because I have a pea head, And the other one was Mike's helmet. Sorry, it's a bit dirty, he's been off-roading in it. But that's his Shoei, that's a medium, and that has a peak. And it can't shut with the peak. I mean, you could shut it, but you'd risk bending the peak and damaging it, and nobody wants that. So I went to get my other Shoei helmet, which unfortunately slid across the floor, as you can probably see by the damage on it. And I put that next to the helmet, and I was able to shut the top box. But do bear in mind that these two helmets are both extra small because they are for my head. So the validity of the claim that it'll fit two extra large full face helmets in, maybe they've tried a specific, I don't know, Triumph branded helmet or something like that, and they've got it to work. But I definitely wouldn't take that as gospel, because I think it depends on a lot of things like the shape of the helmet and, you know, the shell size and stuff like that. But yeah, if you are looking to get the luggage, the top box, and you definitely want to be able to fit helmets in, I would definitely recommend like bringing the helmets in and seeing if you can fit it in there before you commit to buying it, if that's your sole purpose and reason as to why you want the top box, to be able to fit those two helmets in. The side luggage, again, great. I carried so much stuff when I went down to the launch of the Tiger Sport 660 and Trident 660. Everything was kind of full to the brim, and honestly didn't feel the weight dramatically at all when riding this bike. Everything works fine, the panniers work great, easy locking system. You know, the top box was very convenient for my trip down to Hinckley to visit Triumph to ride their Trident 660 and Tiger Sport 660 on the UK launch. And yeah, it was just super helpful. I put my rucksack in with all my electrics in the top box. It just took the weight off my back and just made the miles easy and less fatiguing because I didn't have that weight on my back. Obviously, it's also safer to not have a rucksack on the back, but I'm aware of it and I take a risk when I do wear it, as is my right to do as a sentient human grown adult with a sentient human grown adult brain. But it was nice to dump it in here and then have all my clothes and everything that I might need in the panniers. So yeah, it's definitely great. And if you're not carrying a pillion, you've got provisions also to strap down luggage to the back seat, because you've got a lot of mounting points, which is really good. So now I'm going to demonstrate taking the top box on and off so you can see how easy that is to do. It is super easy, but do be aware that when the top box is off, you do have that metal frame which isn't easy to kind of whip off there and then, and the plastic mounting sort of installation kit as well. It does stay on there and it does stick out quite a lot. So if you do just want to take off the top box because you don't need it, you will have that there, which might be great if you want to strap some other kind of luggage to it, but I suppose that defeats the point of taking the top box off because clearly you need it to carry things. With the panniers on this bike, again, really easy to pop off and really easy to pop on as well. Doesn't take much effort, it's pretty easy to do. So with the luggage, I know there's a few of you guys that may own the Tiger Sport 660 and have the luggage, and you know, the mounting points and the foot peg mounts are exactly the same on the 660 as they are this 800. However, the problem that you have with this is there is the tiniest cutout for the clearance for the silencer, because with the 660 you have the exhaust down here, so you don't need that cutout. So unfortunately, if you are, you know, upgrading to an 800 from a 660, you can't put the panniers on. They do have different part numbers as well, which is an indication that something's different. However, if in the future, you know, when this bike is a few years old, there's more on the market, stuff like that, if you have an 800 with the panniers and you want to, you know, maybe downsize to the Tiger Sport 660, these should go on, well, according to Triumph, they will go on the 660 because the clearance isn't a worry with it. It doesn't matter whether it's got that little cutout because it doesn't need to, it will just fit. I'm just yapping now, but it will fit, which is the main thing. So the next topic is tech and how the tech helps for long distances and, you know, limiting fatigue and enhancing comfort when you're on the trip. So one thing that I will talk about, this bike does come with a quick shifter and auto blipper, and that is very good, especially if you have like wrist issues with your clutch hand. You know, you don't have to work the clutch as much with a quick shifter and blipper, which I always find like the fun aspects of a quick shifter and auto blipper, just, you know, winding it on and up the box. But actually there is a practical application when it comes to, you know, having you not constantly dip in the clutch to change gear and stuff like that. So that can reduce fatigue of the hands and have you feeling loosey-goosey when you get to your destination. Another piece of tech doesn't come with the bike as standard, but it has been spec'd on this along with the luggage. That is heated grips. Now I have to say, I've known fridges that are warmer than these heated grips. They're warm enough just to kind of take the chill off your hands, in my opinion, but I like my heated grips to almost have me in pain a little bit, or at least the option to be in pain. And then, you know, if you don't want to be in pain, you can put it down at a level. But even on the third setting, you know, I don't find these particularly strong. I find them really weak as heated grips, and that kind of sucks because I was wearing summer gloves and I found that they were weak. Imagine if I was wearing big chunky winter gloves. Still on the topic of tech, another thing, the lights. How efficient, how effective are the lights at doing the job? Well, I arrived at Triumph Hinckley at about 10 o'clock at night and it was pitch black. I'd been riding in the dark on the motorway for a long time and the lights were absolutely fine. They, you know, they're good, they work, you can see everything ahead of you. However, this bike specifically is spec'd with the spotlights, and I put the spotlights on and what a difference it made. If I was going to buy this bike, I would absolutely have the spotlights because they're so bright, they're so efficient. Unfortunately, I can't show you examples because when I was filming on the way down there, I haven't quite worked out my DJI settings for nighttime. And honestly, if I showed you the footage, it would do the lights an injustice because it looks pitch black on the video. But to the actual eyes when you're riding with the spotlights, they just illuminate the way and they're just so good. So yeah, if I was purchasing this bike, I'd definitely go for the spotlights. Oh, another thing as well on the tech front, the connectivity. You have connectivity from your phone with the Triumph app, My Triumph, so that'll be good from a navigation perspective if you wanted to use that and integrate it with the bike. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to try it because my phone is screaming for mercy when it comes to data. I need to just clear some stuff off it because it can't download any more apps. It's literally at full capacity. So if you have experience with the My Triumph connectivity on any kind of Triumph, let me know how it works below, whether it's glitchy, whether it works well. You know, I'm interested to hear because I just had my trusty Google Maps on, my Peak Designs mount with my phone on, and that's how I just navigated my way back. So I think we've covered everything we need to cover. Right guys and girls, that concludes the deep dive into the touring capabilities of the 2025 Triumph Tiger Sport 800. Do you think it makes a good tourer, or do you think there are elements that are lacking with this bike that you'd like to see done differently? Let me know in the comments below. Alright guys, if I've missed anything, drop me a comment, I'll try and answer it. And until the next time, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye! In fact, I know the perfect test. Let's see if this seat is Jasper approved. Are you going to tell him if it's comfortable, boy? I mean, evidently not. Bruh.